Me and my partner pick a bale of cotton now. Me and my partner pick a bale a day. I jump down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton now. Jump down, turn around, pick a bale a day.
Welcome to the Standing in This Place podcast. I'm Rachel Carter and I'm the artist behind this project, supported by National Lottery project grants through Heritage Lottery. I'm going to be telling the historic tale of the intertwining of the lives of women working in the textile mills of the industrial Midlands and the enslaved women working the cotton fields in the Americas. I want to introduce to the podcast the wonderful Kayley-Anne Porter, who was one of our interns at the very beginning of this project. So welcome to the podcast, Kayley.
Hello.
So I remember when we started the project, I went and had a chat with Dr. Kath Feely at the University of Derby, and she offered out the opportunity to get involved in this project to her students, and then that's when you responded, wasn't it?
Yes, yeah. So I'm currently studying at the University of Derby. I'm doing like an MA in public history. And as part of that MA, we were doing a consultancy project. So yeah, I was really interested in sort of how artists or museum makers and creators are joining the gaps. And I was really, when Kath described the work you were doing, I was fascinated and couldn't wait to be a part of it.
Oh, that's great. So, and what were the kind of projects that have you been doing up to this point then as part of your studies?
So the course is public history. So it's like how can we, lots of times historians spend years researching something and then it just sits on a dusty shelf and the public never engage with it. So this course is designed to encourage public engagement with history, really. I think that's the way that funding's going, and that's the way everything should be going. It's like things shouldn't be separate, and how do we join them equally? And that's what your work, I think, does so beautifully. I'm really inspired by all the things you were doing.
Oh, thank you. That's lovely to hear. And it is interesting to sort of hear that things are changing a lot more from
Yeah.
the academic side and point of view, and thinking a lot more about the people who are actually going to be engaging in that history out in the public realm. So that's fascinating to hear. And as part of that, do you get to work with museums and other organisations?
Yeah, so the course, we work with academics from across the country. They come in, and most of our teachers have got a museum background or they write in the heritage sector. So we all have to write papers and on particular subjects and invite academics in the field about public history practice. And now I'm currently working at Pickford House, or with Pickford House. We're doing an audience development survey. So how can they try and attract people from the local Derby area to use Pickford House, because they're having a bit of a crisis of what the house is and people aren't engaging with it, and how can they help people engage with it, or what do they need to change to make it more attractive? I think that's the hard question.
Yeah, and I suppose I can see how the MA that you're doing and how we were approaching the project, the similarities, because for myself as a sculptor, and you're taking all of that history and then you're trying to filter that through a public art piece, but you also want the community to engage with it at the same time, with development and how that piece develops, and then its life once you've finished and you've placed it into the public realm. And it can be quite tricky task, and it needs a lot of, I think, coming from lots of different avenues.
Yeah, well, especially when looking at your project, you were quite all-encompassing. Like, you were taking on not just people from different backgrounds but different age groups and really supporting them through that journey. But then that's quite a lot of pressure, I think, on you as the artist yourself, like with the dealings of like well-being and everything like that, trying to get those lines blurred, and how much you're supported by, say, different funding organizations, but what's expected of you. And I think that's where it can become difficult when not necessarily in your project, but other projects as well, funders expect a lot of input and output, but not necessarily supporting the practitioners in all aspects. And I think that's the future of it, trying to develop that so people are more supported, and I can offer some more support. But it's challenging, I think.
So when you first started working with me, our first job was to catalogue
Yes.
all of the items that was part of the project ready for the exhibition, which was a large task in itself, going through all the bits and pieces that made up the background to the sculpture model. But I think the one that we were really able to sink our teeth into was the lace maker's history, which was
Yes.
absolutely fascinating.
Yes, it's just we got to go through the sound archives. I think you've been given access to these wonderful oral histories, and I think it's that classic example of hearing those voices and those stories, and sometimes even the jokes really humanizes the people to you. And I think there's nothing else like it when you can get those sound clips. It really brings the project to life.
It does. So we were given access to a series of recordings that were made in 1983. So they were recorded onto cassette tapes, and it was part of a project called The Lace Trade in Nottingham: Manufacturers, Outworkers, Machine Manufacturers, Lace Workers, and Dyers. And many of the people interviewed were born at the end of the 1800s or the beginning of the 1900s. But there was such a lot of content, and I think your job was to listen through these archives and pick out points of interest and try and narrow it to a 90-second clip.
Yes.
So how did you first approach taking these large audio recordings and starting to narrow them down? What was your process, Kaylee?
You had some ideas, some key themes that you wanted to try and get hold of, and then it's just listening, just sort of like, first of all, just starting to listen through everything, and maybe a couple of times, and just sort of like, I really like, for me, that's a bit of I really enjoy the audio nature of that history, because I'm quite dyslexic, so lots of times reading and heavy text is quite problematic. But for me, sort of listening to something, I can listen to it in every aspect of my life, just in the back, like listen to it, and then sort of just getting almost like a feel for an audio, sort of like an audio sort of chunk, isn't it? It's something just sort of feels, and you're like, oh, that was interesting. And it's just looking out for those bits that spark interest or make you think of other bits, or other bits of history, or you're just like, oh, I didn't know that that's how a loom worked. Oh, I didn't realize they got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. That's an extremely long day.
Yeah. So, well, let's have a listen to one of these clips. And the first one we're going to hear is from a woman who was born in 1894 in Nottingham. And she describes how her father first began his own lace factory. So let's have a listen.
That's it, 1894 was when I was born.
Can you remember anything about the house you were born in?
Oh, it was an ordinary street row of houses.
Terraced houses?
Well, it was right the length of the street, all attached, you know. Just all two up and two down. And it was there that my father started his lace factory. He used to work from 4 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, and he used to doss in the factory, Gamble's factory in Newdigate Street, up off Fritton Road. And he'd worked himself up from one lace machine until he got 12. When women wore high collars, boned high collars, and he made the little narrow edged lace about like that, and it was gophered, so it made a frill round the face.
I think what was quite amazing at, just listening to that lady is, well, first, she brings that period of history alive,
Yeah.
and it's quite hard sometimes to imagine that you're listening
Yeah.
to someone who was born in 1894. But then you also imagine that all the lace manufacturers were all big, huge companies. And you
Yeah.
forget that there was some people that started off from the ground up like this one, which was amazing.
Well, that's it. And I think as it goes on, she gives quite an in-depth interview, and she talks about that her father was really successful, and she ended up in a big house on the hill and became like she went into to become a millionaire. Yeah, I just like that clip because it reminds me a lot. My father comes from up north in Leeds, and that's how he always spoke to us about dossing in and talks about our families living in a two up, two down. So it kind of is very relatable, isn't it? You can see the building, and also I like the 4 o'clock till 10 o'clock is the working conditions that's how you have to do, and lots of people worked that and didn't make it above, but it just bring it back home, doesn't it? Long hours.
It definitely does, and and those visual descriptions of the buildings, of the terrace streets, that you can still see examples of those around the area, but it really does bring that bit of history alive. And I think what was wonderful listening to the clips that you'd selected, they all had such unique stories to tell. Some were funny and some were very factual, but having them narrate their own story in their own voice, it was just so unique to be able to listen to these pieces of history.
I think that's the beauty of a project like this, isn't it? We unpack, and I think all the way through there's like pathways that you've followed with this lace makers and with the figures and with with the research into the costume design. Each step of the way you've uncovered leaves of the past, and people have been connected with them, and I just think it's wonderful.
Oh, thank you. So let's have a listen to another one. And this was quite interesting for me. So this was a gentleman that was born in 1891, and he explains about some of the jobs that the women did from young to old, which I found quite fascinating. So let's have a listen to this one.
No, the old women, what happened, the lace was made in the factories, you see, whether it be Chilwell, Perry's factory, Sampson's at Court Fire, or even at Long Eaton and that. It all came into Nottingham, or in bundles, you know, and the old ladies used to go with the old perambulators and fetch it and take it home and clip it and scallop it. Then it would come back to the lace market by the old women. Then it would go to Houghton, Spray and Burgess, Colic, or Lindley and Lindley, Bobby's Mill or something like that, and be dressed. And it had come back a third time, and the Jennier girls, the Jenniers, would work it on a card, and then it would go to the pattern girls, then it would go to the manufacturers of wedding dresses or shops. You could go in a shop and buy a couple of yards of it, the same sort that would go on a wedding dress, you know.
I think what I really enjoyed about that was you could get a sense that it wasn't just the city centre that was involved in the lace production, that it spanned across Nottinghamshire from lots of different parts of the jobs. But then that visual picture of all of these old women with old prams loaded up with lace, and they'd go and fetch it from the factory and take it home and work on it. That was just, you can really see that, can't you, when he describes it?
It's very evocative, isn't it? You can see the big black old-fashioned ones. And I think as well, this clip kind of comes up, there's got the theme of the gig economy that comes out through quite a few of the clips of like people being outside of the factory taking piecemeal work, and they would be paid for those little bits, and it's just that idea. I thought that was quite interesting, because sometimes you tend to think of people being, like you said, static in one place, but there were all these other industries sort of feeding in that were helping the workers, maybe still working at home doing some lace work or coming into the factory. They were transporting it.
Definitely. And I think when I've given talks about this project, a lot of people ask me about the ages, because they assume, like a lot of people, that it would only have been young women that were working in the lace factories and young women that was working in the cotton fields. And the more that we research, the more we find that that wasn't the case. And that in the case of the lace workers, that upon marriage, that work didn't stop. they had to continue that in the home as well as
Yeah.
looking after
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
children. So, and you can really sort of picture that with that description that he gave.
You can, and just, yeah, definitely. I think it's a very interesting clip.
Yeah, and it mirrors something my grandma used to tell me about when she first started work. She worked in a factory in Nottingham, that before she started work, she'd pedal to the nearby lace factory on her cycle and go and collect a large box of lace for her mum. And then she'd take it back. Her mum would work the lace. And then my grandma would go off to the factory for a day's work, and then she'd do the return of that lace. So she'd go home, collect the finished lace samples from her mum, and then take them back to the factory. So
Yeah.
that lace work continued right up into old age.
Oh, and it just makes me go, oh, because it looks so difficult. I know you would have got the hang of it, but for your eyes, you wouldn't have very good light, and your fingers. I don't know. They will talk about in the clips the changing of the nylon from the cotton to the nylon threads as well, cutting their fingers. It's really hard work, hard, intricate, time-consuming, concentrated work.
Yeah. So, let's have a listen to the one, because there was a lovely one that talked about the types of materials. So let's have a listen to that now, because she describes that change from cotton to nylon and then them coming back again to cotton.
Yes, it was all cotton when I first did it, when my mum did it. Never saw anything, never nylon, nothing. Now it's all nylon. But it's coming back again now, cotton. You get an odd couple of pieces, and it's definitely, this last 2 years, it's definitely lace cotton coming back. It's much easier to do.
The cotton is?
Well, yeah, because the nylon thread cuts your hands to pieces when you're pulling it. And you get such a lot of dust, in this dress, what they put in the dress, rosin or something, I don't know. Makes your throat all dry. And it can give you a headache sometimes. It's terrible. You can get good work, you can get bad. And as I told you, the threads were somehow coming out better. Yeah. We was having new machines, you see. When you get old machines are worn out, they make breaks in the work and tags, bobbin cord. You've got to go down cutting it and.
Oh, that's it, isn't it? The hard. I think you can almost imagine it on your fingertips, isn't it? Almost like a paper cut, and then not being able to stop, isn't it?
Yeah, because nylon is quite tough, isn't it? It's not soft and supple like you would a cotton thread. But it's interesting that that they'd started off using historically using cotton, and then as the synthetic materials started to come through into the lace manufacturing, that they started to use that, but then they were coming back again to cotton, finding that was a better material to use.
Do you think that's it? And then maybe I was thinking, I didn't know if that was the case, that lace was becoming more of a bespoke, high fashion item, that the cotton was more attractive to people because they wanted it to be more special. But I don't know if that was the case still then, because they're still mass producing the lace, aren't they, at this point?
Yeah. So I think when this interview was recorded in 1983, it sounds from this individual like she was, up to recent years still working in the lace trade, which is great to get that audio description of people from, spanning almost 100 years in the lace trade. Also talking about that, how she talks about when they're using nylon and the mistakes it makes and the pulls and the threads that it makes in the lace. So there was another little snippet that you highlight, which I thought was really interesting, but about the lace makers having to forcibly purchase anything that went wrong, which lessened their wages even more. And you just can't imagine now, somebody working in a factory, a piece going wrong, and they're forced to buy that out of their own wages. So let's have a listen, and then we'll have a little talk about this one.
A friend of mine, a girl that I got to know, she used to work at Thomas Adams, and of course I got a job then. I went at Thomas Adams to be with her. and that was be doing net tucking on a machine. You know, and you know when these this net tucking, when this net came in, sometimes it was ever so springy. But you know when it went through the machine, sometimes the tucks didn't run straight. But you know, if you didn't do it properly, they wouldn't pass it, and you used to have to buy it when you'd done, out of your wages. Yes, you used to have, and when you only used to get about, of course we were on our own time. Of course, and if you only earned about perhaps 8 or 9 shilling a week, and you'd got to pay for this piece that was wrong, I mean, you didn't get much at the end of the week. Sometimes it was only about 2 shillings.
Oh, it's just, you just feel, I can just, that working all week in those conditions and then to come away with 2 shillings, it's just disheart. It just makes it makes me feel sad, doesn't it? Just it's just unfair.
Very much. So that lady, she was born in 1892. So you can imagine that she would have started work just at the turn of the early 1900s.
Yeah.
And the Adams buildings, obviously, they're still standing in Nottingham and within the lace market area. But yeah, just being forced to purchase all of these wrong pieces of lace, and what's she going to do with all of that lace, that's got full of errors? She can't use it to feed herself or her family, so what's she supposed to do with all these samples that have gone wrong?
It's just difficult, isn't it? Especially the conditions. You're hungry, you're really tired, and I can imagine it's very loud, very overstimulating, and then you just make a silly mistake and that's your whole week gone.
Yeah. But I think what was also lovely was that you also picked out, we had the difficulties of this of this industry, but then you also found moments of joy as well, which I think you probably know which one's coming. But have a listen to this. This lady was born in 1899, and she's got such a sense of humour that I think really comes across in her interview. So let's have a listen.
He walked up and down and watched them, and as the shuttle became nearly empty, he pressed and took it out while the machine was going and put a new one in, quick, so that it wouldn't make too much mending.
So you were doing embroidery on net, actually,
Yes,
were
they
you?
went on net. Some was silkish net, black for ladies' evening wear, such as flouncing, and camisoles, they call them. And then there was the white with flouncing for either underwear for these real ladies for the evening wear.
Yeah.
A big belt has worked all on a pulley, has worked all the machines.
Yeah.
Because when we wanted to break, we used to get a piece of soap, snip it on the belt, and then when the belt got to the top, it slipped off. So
That was one of the tricks.
that was a bit of mischief.
Yeah.
Oh, I just love that clip. That they're tired and they're not allowed to take a break just yet, so they over lubricate the belt with soap, and it slides off. And we've got to down tools for a while the engineer comes and fixes it.
Well, that's it. You can't let them grind you down, isn't it? And I think that's a bit of that spirit and fun and jokes that you have in those sort of surroundings. That's it. You're gonna have to make it fun.
Yeah, you make the most of it. So, but again, it's finding all of these different facets of life of that industry from that time that really brings this history to life. And I think the final clip we're going to hear was a gentleman that was born in 1900, and he describes the lace industry as a whole family affair, with everybody from the family taking different roles. So let's have a listen.
A twist down, that's the common name for a lace maker. And the brothers became twist down, same as my father. My sisters worked in the family doing in the factory doing various jobs, such as winding. He'd get there round about 7 o'clock in the morning till probably 7 at night. The twist hand used to take them from the machine and put them on a table down what was called his alley, you see, and it'd take the bobbins which were fitted into carriages. It'd take the whole lot out and put them on the tables for the girl operatives to renew, you see. We call that threading. And the twist hand used to sit at his table and attend to the carriages as they threaded them, you see, and then put them back into the machine till that 4,000, approximately 4,000 had been threaded by the operatives.
I think it's great. I think that clip shows the pride. There was a lot of pride in the work, and it was difficult, but people were very proud of the work they did.
Yeah, and you know, and that it was, you know, the descriptions as well of the jobs, because I think when you come across these descriptions in census reports and other data, you know, it's difficult to get an idea of what their job actually entailed. So having that first-hand account of a twist hand about how brothers, sisters, fathers, you know, all worked in the same factory, you know, and we can see that in some of the other evidence that we found, that it was, you know, big family groups that were going into the factories. And that was the case with my ancestors. It was a group of siblings going in. But I think his descriptions are fantastic.
No, yeah, I think especially because you can, like, 4,000 is a tangible number, isn't it? But you can think, how would you even get to do it, and how quick and precise must you be? I don't know if I could do a series of 10 to be precise and not have to get charged for them. I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and that in that period of working day that you've got to get through 4,000 of these bobbins, you know, that's a lot of work, isn't it? They must have had to work at such speed, which again shows that level of skill that they had within that industry.
Yeah, no, definitely. And and also goes back to the level of, like, having some jokes and songs and something to keep you occupied in your working day and just keep you motivated and focused.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, you know, what was just fantastic about working with you on this project, you know, was, you know, it felt like such a mammoth task at first, you know, that after visiting Nottingham Library and discovering this archive, then to come away with all of these tracks recorded in the 1980s, but then to start thinking, well, how on earth do we then narrow this down, and how do we highlight? So I think the job that you did, Kaylee, was fantastic to really sort of reduce that content and just to pick out some of these little gems from that archive.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. But I think because you have very clear idea and boundaries, it was a lot easier to sort of get a feel for what the kind of thing that you needed and the project needed, because I had those firm boundaries in the sense. And so that really helped, because you could keep coming back. Because sometimes I would get waylaid with a story of a drunken Harriet lady, and I'd be like, oh, that's it. But it was good to keep coming back, because sometimes you can get lost in what you find interesting. And actually, is that going to be interesting to the wider group? Does it move the project forward? Is it relevant? And I think that's where, like, working with you, who is a curator of those experiences, is really vital, because you're like, yes, this is good. This is also good, but does it move the project forward? Does it help focus what we need to do? And is it going to be accessible to everyone? And that kind of, falls back to what we're doing at Public History. It's like, you have an idea of what you think is interesting, applicable, other people would be interesting, but actually, until you talk to other people and actually work with them, it doesn't really matter. It always doesn't really matter. It's not helpful if you're just on your own thinking and reading it. Until you've got that collaboration, it's pointless. For me, that's what I feel.
Yeah, it's very interesting to hear that this is, you know, the way that your MA is structured, but the way that the museums that you're working with now are thinking about,
Yeah.
the visitor experience, and what is it that they're going to find interesting
Yes.
about that place or that collection, rather than just it being about the person with all that academic knowledge going, oh, well, this
Yes.
is all fantastic. It's about how the public's going to engage
Yeah.
with it. And
Yeah.
you have to look at it in a very different way, I suppose.
Well, the depth of the experience that you can, like, with your standing in this place project, with your final output being the beautiful statue, but as you look into the project and you keep going, and each layer is, and like you look into projects, each layer, it's just amazing. It's like, I think that work that you're doing is on the forefront of what we should be doing. That's how it should be going. It's like collaborative and engaging and research based, and has an artistic output that lots of people that don't see themselves as historians can be involved with and have learned, and have maybe gone away being like, oh, what else can I learn? What else can I do? These spaces are for me. And it stopped it being in other place in both ways. Like, I just, that's the bit I just love.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Kaylee. It's quite gratifying to hear that, because you do, when we're making sculptures, as sculptors that work within the public realm, a lot of mine are based on history, and it's like that. It's another door, another entry point into history, to heritage, to culture, to place. That's maybe a gentler path than, if people aren't comfortable in museums, or or know that they're there. This could often be, a gentler introduction, or make something to make them question, well, why are they there? Why are these two women there? Why are they dressed like that? Why are they here? And I suppose if people are asking questions of the sculpture when it's in the part, then, then maybe that's the job well done. If people are questioning and wanting to research themselves and find out more, then I've done my job right. So fingers crossed that we've still got a way to go with the sculpture until it's, placed in the park. But having things like the podcast and these, these sound archives, just make that all of that history, that resources that we've used to inform the sculpture, it makes it then accessible for the general public who are seeing a finished sculpture.
Yeah, definitely. I think so. And I think it's just all the echoes, isn't it? And each person that was involved in the dance group, in the legacy makers, and they're sort of, the echoes of that experience will go on. And so that's, I suppose that's all we can hope for in sort of heritage making.
So can I ask you then, so what's the next step for Kaylee? So once you've completed your MA, so what's your career path looking like?
So once, hopefully, if I complete my when I complete the MA, I would like to, because it also, I would like to help change how we teach history in schools using some of the sort of processes we've talked about already in the podcast. So I think that I've come up with a project called Ancestors Calling. So the idea would be to try and do a PhD. I want to go and work in a pupil referral unit and try and work with the children there. We're doing some research on on their personal histories, or in a history area that they're interested in, and working with them on research methods. And then after a term, we produce an artistic output that they're interested in making, and then hopefully sow the seeds of sort of in being interested in research methods, and they sort of get them interested in history. And I think history is such a gateway. For me, it has been. So that's what I would like to do, and then sort of maybe taking that project on if it works, and then sort of folding it out in, because the history curriculum currently is still the same history that you and I did at school. It's still very First World War, Second World War, history of medicine based, which is fine, but that's taught all the way through. So you could do it in schools, at GCSE, at A levels. It's still quite a very dry. So I love history, and it's It's very dry, even as a historian and someone that's been interested in history all the way through. So it's maybe just trying to humanise the history. But yeah, that would be my ideal. We'll see if that gets done.
That sounds like an amazing idea to, to humanize history. That sounds like such a wonderful idea, and I really hope that it works for you.
Well, it's getting that nugget, isn't it? Because once you're interested, then you're interested. And if you've seen with all your participants, it's so different what everyone's interested in. They might be interested in the family history or the clothes history or the oral history that I'm interested in, but you just want to find out more. And the more information you get and the connections you make, well, that's it.
Yeah. Wow, thank you. Well, I want to thank you, Kaylee, for being such a fantastic guest, but also for being such a fantastic intern for the project.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Rachel. That's very kind of you.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this episode, and don't forget to tune in for another episode of the Standing in This Place podcast. Thank you for listening.
Me and my partner pick a bale of cotton now. Me and my partner pick a bale a day. I jump down, turn around, pick a bale of cotton now. Jump down, turn around, pick a bale a day.